The Washington, D.C. press room was a pressure cooker that afternoon, packed wall to wall with reporters, their notebooks out, pens poised, and a row of cameras stretching across the back like a firing squad. The air buzzed with an electric tension you could feel in your bones. Something big was brewing, even if nobody could pin it down yet. Karoline Leavitt stepped up to the podium, all cool confidence, her dark blazer crisp against the beige wall behind her. She wasn't new to this game. Tough crowds were her bread and butter, but today had a different edge. She adjusted the mic, her voice steady as steel. "Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started." Hands shot up like weeds after a rainstorm, reporters jockeying to get their shot in first. Caroline pointed to a familiar face, a wiry guy from a major network, glasses perched low on his nose. He lobbed a softball about the administration's latest immigration push, and she knocked it out of the park with a polished, practiced answer. "We're building policies that lift every American, plain and simple." Next came a question on healthcare funding, a little thornier, but she handled it smooth as silk. No hesitation, no sweat. She'd done this dance 100 times. Hold the line, control the narrative, keep the press in check like a pro. But then the air shifted. A voice cut through the room, sharp as a razor. "Ms. Leavitt, let's talk about the real issue here." It was Rachel Hargrove, perched near the front row, leaning forward like a predator, sizing up prey. She was mid-30s, sharp-eyed, with a faint smirk that screamed trouble. Her pen tapped a steady rhythm on her notepad, a tick that hinted at the restless energy she carried, an energy Caroline knew too well. Rachel wasn't just any reporter. She'd been a thorn in the administration's side for months, ever since a leaked memo last fall had her sniffing for blood. Caroline kept her cool, nodding slightly. "Go ahead." Rachel didn't blink. "Do you think the administration's policies are deliberately screwing over certain communities? Because the numbers I've seen suggest—" Caroline raised a hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "I've answered that before, Rachel. We're focused on helping every American, no exceptions. If you've got something tied to today's topic, I'm happy to dig in." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, some intrigued, some impatient, but Rachel wasn't fazed. She leaned closer, her voice dropping an octave. "You didn't really answer, though. Can you just say flat out if—" "I did answer," Caroline snapped, her tone firm but still under control. She flicked her eyes to the other reporters, signaling she was done with this detour. For a moment, the room seemed to exhale, like the storm might pass. But Rachel wasn't letting go. "I just don't get why you're dodging this," she pressed, her words slicing through the quiet. "It's a yes or no deal. Are these policies hurting vulnerable groups?" The mood turned on a dime. Reporters swapped glances, some curious, some rolling their eyes. Nobody wanted a briefing to morph into a slugfest, but here it was, unfolding in real time. Caroline let out a slow, deliberate breath, her hands resting on the podium's edge. "I'm not dodging anything. I'm staying on track. If you've got a question about today's agenda, I'll take it. If not, I'm moving on." But Rachel wasn't backing down. She edged closer to the mic, her smirk widening. "So, that's a no comment?" The tension spiked, every eye ping-ponging between them. Silence fell. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels like a coiled spring ready to pop. Caroline's grip on the podium tightened just a fraction. "I've answered you," she said, her voice level as she pointed to a reporter in the back. "Next." Before the guy could even open his mouth, Rachel cut in again. "Why is it so hard to give a straight answer?" A flicker of irritation flashed across Caroline's face, just a tightening around her eyes, but enough for the keen observers to catch it. She wasn't some newbie fresh off the campaign trail. She'd faced down worse than this. She knew reporters had a job to do, but there's a difference between digging for truth and turning a briefing into your own personal stage. And Rachel? She was all about the spotlight. Caroline inhaled through her nose, steadying herself. "I'm not here to waste anybody's time. If you've got a new question, I'll answer it. Otherwise, I'd like to give someone else a turn." Rachel smirked, unfazed. "Sure, new question. Why is this administration so scared of owning up to stuff?" A couple of gasps slipped out, quiet but audible. Pens scratched furiously across notebooks, the room sensing a headline brewing. Caroline blinked slowly, her fingers flexing on the podium before relaxing. She flashed a smile. Not the warm, diplomatic kind, but a cold one that said, "I've got your number." She paused, letting the silence stretch, then fired back. Owning up? That's what we're all about. But what you're doing isn't about answers. It's about putting on a show. The words landed like a punch. Rachel's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat. A gray-haired reporter near the back coughed into his fist, trying to break the standoff. Ms. Leavitt, if I could... But Rachel steamrolled right over him. So you're brushing off legit concerns as a show? Americans deserve real answers. The camera zoomed in, catching every twitch. Karoline's slight head tilt, the way the other reporters squirmed. Some were clearly pissed. Their briefing was getting derailed. A veteran journalist with a buzz cut and 30 years in the game leaned over to his neighbor. This ain't reporting. It's a damn one-woman play. But Rachel didn't give a rip. She knew every second she kept this going was another tick toward viral gold. Karoline saw it too. She had a split-second choice. Keep trading blows and fuel the fire, or shut it down hard. She sighed, her gaze flicking to the security guard stationed 10 feet to her right. A burly guy in a black suit, hands clasped, waiting. She didn't need to say a word. Her look was enough. The room went taut as a wire. Everybody knew what was up. Rachel didn't flinch. Still leaning forward, pen resting on her pad, that smirk hanging on like it was glued there. She wasn't just fishing for answers. She was out to leave a mark, and Karoline could feel the weight of it. Karoline straightened, her voice cutting through. I'll say this one more time. If you've got a relevant question, I'll take it. But I'm not standing here for bad faith arguments. Rachel let out a low chuckle, shaking her head like she couldn't believe it. Bad faith? I'm doing my job. Isn't that what a free press is for? Karoline didn't blink. A free press is about holding people accountable. What you're doing is turning this into a circus. A few murmurs bubbled up. The room was splitting, some nodding faintly, others scribbling like their pens were on fire. This wasn't about policy anymore. It was about who'd come out on top. Rachel tapped her pen once, loud enough to echo. So, just to be clear, Karoline cut her off, anticipating the jab. You refusing to answer because you can't, or because you won't? A couple of reporters sucked in sharp breaths, bracing for impact. Karoline exhaled, her words measured. I'm refusing to play games. This press conference isn't about you. Rachel's smirk flickered. Then she leaned back, crossing her arms. Right, 'cause expecting straight talk is a game. The murmurs grew louder, the room tipping toward chaos. Karoline had faced her share of sharks, but this was different. This was a straight-up power grab. She adjusted the mic, stepping back half a foot from the podium. I think we're done here. The words hit like a thunderclap. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? Karoline didn't waver. You've made it clear you're not here for a real conversation. You're welcome to stay and listen, but I'm not taking any more from you. Rachel laughed, quiet, dry, shaking her head. So, shutting down the press. Got it. Karoline's jaw clenched. She knew that line was a grenade primed to explode the second it hit the airwaves, but she also knew there was no reasoning with someone hell-bent on a scene. She shot a quick glance at the guard, a subtle nod, and the room snapped into high gear. Chairs creaked as people shifted, the tension boiling over into something raw. The cameras went wild, shutters clicking like a swarm of cicadas, zeroing in on Karoline's sidelong look. Rachel caught it too, and her smirk vanished. You're seriously doing this? Her voice dropped low, but it still cut through the din. Karoline didn't respond. The guard took a slow step forward, his polished shoes clicking on the tile floor. He didn't need to speak. His presence said it all. Rachel had a choice. De-escalate or double down. She chose the latter. This is unreal, she muttered, shaking her head, then louder for the mics. So much for press freedom, huh? Karoline stood her ground. Press freedom doesn't mean derailing a briefing. Rachel snorted, glancing around like she was rallying the room to her side. A few reporters dodged her gaze, burying their faces in their notes. Others scribbled faster. The guard took another step, now just 5 feet away. For a split second, Rachel froze, her eyes darting, weighing her options. She could plant her feet, force them to haul her out, and bank the viral clip of a lifetime. Or she could walk out, head high, and spin the narrative her way. Karoline watched the decision play out in Rachel's sharp brown eyes. Then, slow as molasses, Rachel grabbed her notepad, stood, and slung her bag over her shoulder. This is a disgrace, she muttered, loud enough for the mics to snag it. Then one final parting shot as she turned for the door. You can kick me out, but you can't kill the truth. Karoline didn't flinch. The door slammed shut behind Rachel, and the room went dead quiet. Thick, heavy silence that pressed down like a fog. Nobody knew what to do next. Cameras kept rolling, lenses trained on the empty space where Rachel had been. Some reporters doodled in their notebooks, avoiding eye contact. Others stared, slack-jawed. Then a voice piped up from the back, a lanky guy with a beard. Ms. Leavitt, you think this was the right move? Karoline turned, her posture still ramrod straight. I think it was the only move. Another voice, this one from a woman in a red blazer. You don't worry this'll blow up in your face? Karoline's lips twitched, not quite a smile. She knew it would. Knew that by the time she hit the hallway, the internet would be a bonfire of hot takes and clipped videos. She could already see the headlines screaming, Karoline Leavitt boots reporter for tough questions. Did it matter? She squared her shoulders. We're here for discussion, not disruption. Anybody got a real question? I'm all ears. After a beat, a hand crept up. The briefing limped on, but the real storm was just breaking. When Karoline stepped off the podium, her phone was buzzing like a chainsaw. Texts, alerts, the works. Staffers clustered near the door, whispering in low, urgent tones. Their eyes flicking between their screens and the exit Rachel had stormed through. She didn't need to check her notifications to know the clip was already spreading like a brush fire across a dry field. As she strode down the hall to her office, heels clicking on the polished floor, an aide hustled up, phone clutched tight. It's trending already. Shasha's silencing the press is picking up steam fast. Karoline exhaled through her nose, a dry huff. Figures. The aide hesitated, scrolling with her thumb. Big outlets are jumping on it. Some are keeping it neutral, just laying out what happened. But others, she trailed off, tilting the screen. Leavitt crushes press freedom. Reporter tossed for speaking truth. Karoline stopped dead in the hallway, 20 feet from her office door. Speaking truth? She let out a half laugh, half scoff. She was grandstanding like it was opening night on Broadway. The aide nodded grim. Doesn't matter. That's not how they're spinning it. Karoline knew this was coming the second she'd locked eyes with the guard. Knew how these moments get chopped up, stripped of context and fed to the outrage mill. But she wasn't about to lose it. She'd been in the trenches too long for that. What's our base saying? She asked, pushing her office door open with her shoulder. The aide trailed her in, still glued to her phone. They're with you. Conservative pundits are calling it a win. Say you handled it like a champ. Karoline nodded, leaning against her desk, arms crossed. And the White House? The aide paused, choosing her words. They're keeping their distance, but no one's throwing you under the bus yet. That hung in the air like smoke. Karoline tilted her head. And Rachel? The aide didn't need to ask who. She's milking it dry. Just wrapped a live hit. Called it a chilling moment for press freedom. She's booked on every major network tonight. Karoline tipped her head back, staring at the ceiling tiles for a second, then straightened. She wanted this, and we served it up on a silver platter. The aide bit her lip, shifting her weight. So what's our play? Karoline didn't answer right off. She crossed to the window, peering down at the street 12 feet below. Reporters were swarming the sidewalk now, cameras flashing, mics out, a news van parked crooked half a block away. She had two paths, hunker down and let it fizzle, or hit back before the story hardened into gospel. Her jaw tightened. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. The noise outside swelled, shouts bouncing off the concrete, a faint siren wailing a mile off. Inside, Karoline stood still, hands braced on her desk, while her aide scrolled through a barrage of headlines. They're split, one said, a wiry guy with glasses. Some say it was fair. You shut down an unprofessional heckler like any press secretary worth their salt. Others, he sighed, scrolling. They're calling it an assault on democracy. Karoline smirked, a dry edge to it. An assault on democracy? For kicking out a reporter who wouldn't follow the damn rules? Nobody answered. They all knew truth took a back seat in the breakneck world of digital rage. A second aide, a woman with short black hair, stepped in, waving her phone. She just posted her full statement. Karoline took a deep breath. Hit me. The aide read it off, her voice flat. Today I got booted from a press conference for doing my job, asking hard questions. This administration claims to care about transparency, but when push comes to shove, they shut down the press. That ought to scare every American who gives a damn about accountability and free speech. Karoline let out a short, bitter laugh. And I bet she left out how she hijacked the whole damn thing? The aide shook her head. Not a peep, just playing the martyr card. It was textbook. Selective edits, curated posts, overblown claims of oppression. Karoline had seen this movie before. She could go on offense, call a briefing, spell out what really went down, hammer home that tossing a disruptive reporter isn't the same as gagging the press. But she knew that it'd just keep the wheels spinning. She drummed her fingers on the desk. What's our best shot? The wary aide hesitated. We could drop the full, unedited video before her version digs in too deep. Let folks see how many times you warned her before security moved. The woman nodded. Doesn't look desperate, just straight up transparent. Karoline chewed it over. Smart move. Let the tape talk. But she knew facts don't always win. Optics do. Her phone vibrated on the desk, alerts stacking up like firewood. She nodded. Drop it. The aide scrambled, drafting a statement, pulling the footage. Karoline watched, her mind racing ahead. Rachel wanted a circus, but she didn't realize Karoline wasn't just reacting. She was laying tracks for the next move. The video hit the web fast. No frills, no narration, just a plain post. Watch for yourself, the full exchange between Karoline Leavitt and the reporter at today's briefing. Karoline sank into her chair, tracking the views. Thousands in minutes, comments flooding in like a tidal wave. Half fury, half cheers. Her phone buzzed. A text from a media buddy. Nailed it. Cuts their legs out. But she knew it wasn't that simple. The spin was already in motion. She clicked on Rachel's latest interview. There she was in a moody studio, brows knit like she was auditioning for a drama. I was just doing my job, she told the anchor, voice steady, asking tough, necessary questions, and instead of answering, I got shown the door. That's a red flag for everybody, no matter your politics. The anchor leaned in, all grave nods. Did you feel threatened? Rachel sighed, a little too theatrical. Not physically, no, but professionally? Absolutely. This is an attack on journalism itself. Karoline rolled her eyes so hard she felt it in her neck, then killed the screen. The truth was out there, raw and unfiltered, but that didn't mean people would swallow it. The wiry aide poked his head in. You'll want to see this. She followed him to the hall where staff were huddled around a TV blaring a conservative channel. The host, a loudmouth with a buzz cut, ran the full clip, pausing at the juicy bits. She cuts in over and over, he barked, shaking his head. This wasn't reporting, it was a stunt. The panelists piled on. Total setup, one said, a woman with hoop earrings. She pushed it till she got tossed, then played the victim card. Karoline crossed her arms, watching the split play out. Conservative voices high-fiving her for holding firm, mainstream outlets painting her as a dictator, stomping on free speech. The aide with the short hair glanced over. Gonna be a long week, Karoline nodded. Yup, but at least the truth's out there now. The real question was who'd buy it. Days later, the story was still a beast, roaring across headlines, talk shows, and X threads. Pundits dissected every frame, each side twisting it to fit their script. Memes popped up like weeds, some mocking Rachel's exit, others casting Karoline as a villain in a black and white flick. The country was cleaved in two, no surprise there. Karoline knew a clean win was a pipe dream. These fights never end tidy. Sitting in her office, she caught a panel debate on a muted TV. A grizzled reporter, one she actually respected, with a gravelly voice and a no-BS streak, leaned in. Let's be real. This wasn't a journalist chasing truth. This was someone gunning for a viral moment, and she nailed it. The other panelists shifted, uneasy with the bluntness. She asked, got an answer, didn't like it, kept pushing, not for clarity, but for a brawl. The second she got the boot, she ran to the cameras crying victim. That's not reporting, that's activism. Karoline let out a slow breath. Finally, someone called it straight, but the damage was baked in. The folks who saw her as a press-crushing tyrant weren't budging, and her allies were already on to the next battle. Then something odd happened. Her phone buzzed, not an alert, but a call. She glanced at the screen. Tom Carver, a retired DC reporter, old school who'd mentored her years back. She picked up. Karoline, his gravelly voice came through. Watch the tape. You did what you had to. That Hargrove woman's been chasing clout since she got canned from her last gig. Leaked memo or not, she's all smoke. I'm writing a piece on it. Thought you should know. Caroline blinked, caught off guard. Thanks, Tom. Means a lot. He grunted. Don't thank me yet. This ain't over. He hung up, leaving her staring at the phone. An unexpected ally, and a hint Rachel's armor might have cracks. The aide with the short hair tapped on the door. Interview request from... Caroline cut her off. Nope. The aide blinked. You don't even know who. Don't care. I'm not feeding this monster anymore. The facts are out. Let him wrestle with them. The aide nodded, backing off. Caroline grabbed her phone, scrolling through the noise. The storm would pass. It always did. But this wasn't just one briefing gone sideways. It was bigger. The way the media machine churns, the way stories get weaponized, the way truth gets buried under clicks and screams. She looked at the aide. Put out one last statement. What's it say? Caroline paused, then smiled. A real one this time. Just 4 words. Watch the full video. The aide grinned, typing it up, because that's what it came down to. The truth, raw and unspun, whether people wanted it or not. But then, as the aide stepped out, Caroline's phone buzzed again. Another text, this time anonymous. Check Hargrove's old tweets. She's got skeletons. Caroline's smile faded, her mind kicking into gear. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was a door cracking open, to turn the tables, dig up Rachel's past, and flip the script entirely. She leaned back, staring out the window at the fading DC dusk. The fight wasn't over. It was just getting interesting. Media integrity's a fragile thing when clicks outrank context. The line between journalism and activism's a blurry mess. The question isn't just whether Caroline was right or wrong, it's whether we've got the guts to see through the noise. And now, with a hint of Rachel's buried past dangling like bait, the story's got one more twist left. What do you think happens next? As twilight painted Washington, D.C. in soft grays, Karoline Leavitt stood by her office window, the city's hum a distant echo. Her phone rested silent, the anonymous text about Rachel's past a loose end she left untouched. For now. The years had carved a truth into her. Beneath the roar of outrage and the glare of headlines, honesty persists, steady as a heartbeat, outlasting the noise. She smiled, not from triumph, but from a calm rooted deep within, a clarity earned through battles fought and lessons learned. Life, she knew, wasn't about silencing the storm. It was about standing firm within it. The day's chaos had laid bare a simple wisdom. Real strength doesn't clamor for attention. It endures, quiet and unyielding. Caroline had chosen not to chase every jab or unravel every thread, trusting that what's true holds its own weight. As night draped the skyline, she felt a peace no spotlight could grant, a stillness born of knowing who she was, beyond the fray. In a world obsessed with winning, she'd found something rarer, the courage to let the truth breathe, to let it carve its own path, steady and sure.